All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the virtual tour of intentional communities. Here we are on the 1st of August for another virtual tour event exploring 3 different communities. My name is Cynthia, and I'm going to be the host for today's event. And I'm calling in from an intentional community where I live in Vermont. And today we're going to be focused on communities located in Virginia, all quite close in proximity to each other and all with some similar themes, but also a lot of differences. So I'm very curious to learn more about them. So welcome to everyone who's coming in. I'm going to queue up my short presentation here. So once again, this is our virtual tour of intentional communities event. We do it every month. And I want to apologize to everyone who was expecting to come last month in July for our event to see these communities. And unfortunately, we had to cancel the event at the last moment because where I live in Vermont was experiencing a pretty significant flood event. We had a lot of rain, and I was in the midst of trying to rescue my pond and the garden, and so the event did not happen then, but I'm very grateful to these communities that they were up for rescheduling and doing it now in August. So today we will be exploring Twin Oaks Community, Acorn Community, and Cambia. And I have a few little announcements and things to share about this event. We are hosting now on StreamYard, which means all of you who are watching on StreamYard and are a member of our program or registered to join this event, you can use the comments. And I really encourage you to use the comment box to engage with our presenters, to engage with each other, and really use this as an opportunity for a little community networking. So go ahead and find the chat box. And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, I'd love to know where you are calling in from. If you live in an intentional community, I'd love to know which one. I also would love to know if you'd be up for being on the show and presenting your community. And share a little bit about why you are here. What do you hope to learn or get out of today's session? And I'll try to steer the conversation towards that. Yes, and also hello to everyone who's not joining us on StreamYard, but is watching on Facebook or YouTube or any of our other channels. Hello to all of you as well. And for the people that are watching the replay later. Great. So go ahead, find the chat box, write in a little blurb. And while you're doing that, I'll share a few more announcements. So first being that all of our past virtual tours, which we've been doing now for more than 2 years, which is incredible for me to realize, pretty much every month for the last 2 years, I've been sitting down with 3 different communities from around the world. All of those recordings are available on the Foundation for Intentional Communities YouTube channel. So I encourage you to go there and watch some past tours and some other great videos that they have. This event is hosted in partnership with the Foundation for Intentional Community, FIC, and also my organization called Community Finders, where we offer programs to support people on their path to community living. So yes, FIC, if you're not aware, is a fantastic nonprofit organization, been around for decades, really offering essential services for us to learn about and find intentional communities. We're hosting this event by donation, so if you feel inspired to go donate to FIC, I encourage you to do so. And also, I know some of you are here as a member of one of my programs as part of the Community Finder Circle. So hi to all our members. And if you feel like joining as a member to get support on your community journey, you can learn more at our website, communityfinders.com. And lastly, we have one more organization supporting today's event, and that is Eco-Village Tours that offers small group travel experiences to visit different communities. Because I know many of you are like hungry to get out there and spend time in these communities, but the logistics of organizing a multi-day tour to visit more than one place can feel overwhelming. So at Eco-Village Tours, we help make that journey a little bit smoother. And all of the communities on today's event are going to be ones that we visit in person during the Virginia Eco-Village Tour. And the Virginia Eco-Village Tour is going to happen starting just before Labor Day weekend, which coincides with a big event that Twin Oaks community hosts every year, the Communities Conference. So I'm sure Paxis is going to tell us more about that event. And if you're coming to the event or considering it, I'd also invite you to consider extended journey in Virginia after the event to visit a whole bunch of communities. I think we're going to visit like 7 or 8 communities over 9 days. So it'll be a lot of traveling and also a lot of fun to not only learn about these communities as we are doing online, but actually go and spend time with them in person. All right, so that is most of what I wanted to share. I'll just invite you now to relax in your chair, maybe let go of whatever else happened earlier in your day, and prepare to give your full attention to our presenters. Maybe just move aside any distractions, grab a cup of tea, glass of water. We're going to be together for about an hour and a half, really diving deep into each of these presentations. And after each presentation, there will be about 10 minutes or so for Q&A. So while you're listening, I also want you to be thinking about questions that you may have for the communities. And I, of course, will be fielding some of those questions and asking them. Oh my goodness, and I'm just taking a moment to check out the chat here. Welcome to Melanie and Lauren, Dylan, Verona. Some of you I know, absolutely. Good. Up from upstate New York. Looking to relocate to Virginia, hopefully in community. Okay, Dylan, I think you've come to the right place today. Excellent. Outside Philadelphia. Beautiful. All right, well, welcome everyone. And we're going to go ahead and get started with our first presenter. And that is going to be Paxis, who is at Twin Oaks Community. And big welcome to you, Paxis. So glad you're here.
Super happy to be here. As Cynthia said, one of the things that I'm most excited about hyping beyond Twin Oaks itself is the 2 events that we're having in the beginning of end of August and beginning of September, which are the Communities Conference, and I put the domain, the URL in for the Communities Conference so you can look at that. But really, this is it's sort of a matchmaking event where people who are interested in community come and intentional communities present themselves. Typically, we have 40 to 50 intentional communities, mostly from the Northeastern United States, but people come from further away and they present themselves. And if you're interested in meeting people from intentional communities and listening to content about intentional communities, this is sort of the best place on the East Coast. And then immediately after that event, on the 2nd, there's an event called the Convergence of Intentional Communities, and it is designed for people who are already in intentional communities. It's not really a matchmaking event. It's really sort of supporting the network and figuring out how we want to work together better, and particularly how to inspire inter-community exchange, both member exchange and other kinds of exchange. But Cynthia, is my thing the full screen here?
Yes, it's full screen. Okay. It looks good.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go. So actually, I'm going to start with a little bit of definition. And I've joined Reddit recently, and there's controversy around the definition. So I'm going to sort of stick you with my definition. What is an intentional community, right? So what I think an intentional community is, it's a group of people who live together who are self-selecting. And then after that, that's the most important thing. It's not a landlord or a property manager. So then after that, this group of people are sharing things. And there's a giant spectrum as to how much intentional communities share. And the interesting thing about today's presentation is that we're at the far end of it, right? Twin Oaks, Acorn, Cambia, these are in the commune sphere. These are income sharing communities. These are communities that own businesses, and basically the deal is you work your quota for the community, and the community covers all of your bills. Now that is a very, there are not very many of these in the United States. There may be 24 secular organizations that identify themselves as communes. The communes are a small part of the intentional community spectrum, and you can have an intentional community that's a college co-op, where the people who are in the co-op select the next generation based on cultural consistency, but they may not share much economically or culturally, and that's not who we are. We're the, if it's possible to share it, we share it. Okay, so I'm going to go into Twin Oaks. Founded in 1967, just short of 500 acres of land, 88 adults, and that's currently our population capacity. That's all the adults we can handle. We are starting a growing list of people who've been accepted to live here, who can't yet live here because we don't have a room for them. That it's worth pointing out that at the worst point post-COVID, we were down to 63 adults. It collapsed our largest business. So we've significantly bounced back from then. We have a bunch of shared vehicles. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We had $1 million in the bank until recently. It's down because we just had a big fire. The community has sustainability as a high value. So we grow about 60% of the produce that we consume, and about 100% of the dairy comes from our dairy program. And we have chickens and bees, but I didn't mention them. The highlighted at the bottom piece, I'm going to rant about for just a second. If you read the reports from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, this 2,000-person expert panel from the United Nations that talks about climate change, if you read their recommendations, they say to stop climate change, we have to cut our climate footprint by 80%. And when you ask people, economists in the United States, what that looks like, they say, well, maybe you can get 20% from renewables, and maybe you can get 20% from efficiency, but without significant reduction in quality of life, we can't get there. And what Twin Oaks and Acorn and Cambia are is sort of proof that there are very low carbon models that rely on sharing as their principal method. So we're not saying you have to dramatically reduce your quality of life. What we're saying is you have to just be willing to share many, many things, and you can reduce your impact. Okay, so the basic agreement, you come to Twin Oaks, you're a brand new member, and we say, you work your 38.5 hours a week on average, that's the quota. But that number, that 38 number, is a little deceptive, because when you think of that as your work week, what you're paid for, but that includes all hours, both domestic and income. So you're cooking and you're cleaning collective spaces, and a bunch of childcare and fixing buildings and gardening and all kinds of other things are labor creditable at Twin Oaks that are not labor creditable in your life. And in exchange, the community basically offers a full social safety net. They housing, food, medical, dental, childcare, education, clothing, all of it, right? Like all of the things that you would get in a full system, because we are not paying you, right? We're giving you tiny monthly income, which actually just went down from $100 a month. And therefore the community can't expect for you to pay for these things, right? So the community pays those things, including taxes. I didn't list taxes there. Okay, so one way to look at Twin Oaks, and I think all of the intentional communities that are currently represented today, is that we are a network of libraries. So we share tools and shops and cars and bikes and clothes. All of these different things there are at Twin Oaks, which is a large, relatively successful community. All of these things are out there, and all of these things are available to the whole membership. So think of libraries beyond books, like if it's possible to share it, we share it. All right. Now, this is sort of a challenge to the way most people think about things. And historically, we've thought, oh, I need my own car, I need my own clothes, I need my own bicycle, all of these things I need because I want to make sure that they're in operating condition. I want to make sure that they're there when I need them. And then the internet comes along and disrupts, right? Like Uber and Lyft represent a challenge to this question of car ownership. Like, do you need a car? Or do you need access to car services? And in fact, in the case of Uber and Lyft, they've convinced a whole bunch of people that what they need is access to services. And what Twin Oaks and the communes do is they say, you don't need your own shirt. You just need access to clean clothes. You don't actually care about the ownership of the shirt as long as you have it whenever you need it. Same with cars, same with bikes. And if the supplies, if the libraries are high enough functioning, then it's actually an advantage to be in a library situation, because then the maintenance is taken care of, and all these other aspects that you don't have to deal with in such a headachy way for ownership. All right, these numbers are a little bit old, but basically this shows that earlier slide that I had said we were talking about having about 20% the carbon impact of average U.S. Americans. So we have 88 adults, 15 kids. So we're looking at what the usage and ecological impact is for 100 people in the United States. And you can see from the last category that we're right about 20% for most things. Very important is the last line, which is taxable income, right? So I told you I get less than $100 a month, and you say, hey, what is this $7,000 number? So the average Twin Oaker in 2017 had a taxable income of $7,000, which represents the profits of the community that those members didn't receive. The members received services instead. But we're taxed as though the profits were given to us. Now, what's important about this number is that it's just over half of the poverty line in the United States, right? So, if we go back to the libraries, I have access to all of these things, right? Which many people don't have access to, even if they have more money than us. But because we're doing this sharing thing, all of those services are available to us. So even though the taxable income is low, the level of services is very high. Oops. Okay, so here's sort of the elevator pitch of advantages. I would say 20% of the people who come to Twin Oaks come because they've had a bunch of bad experiences with bosses, and they want to be in an environment in which they're not being bossed around. And these communities have tremendous internal flexibility. So even if you don't get along with the boss of dairy, you can switch to some other area and not have to work with them again if they're managing style. And because it's an hour is an hour, you can relatively easily move inside your labor system. Okay, so the next item is sort of guaranteed social safety net. How you're never gonna go medical bankrupt. You're never gonna be hungry. You're never gonna not have housing or clothing. Lots of social things happening. I've talked about climate impact. So all three of these communities have very different decision-making methods. So I'm not going to try to put us all in the same category, except to say that we're all trying to maximize the power of the individual inside of the organization by trying to shrink the hierarchy that we're engaged in. I think there is proof that we got from New York University in Binghamton, or SUNY Binghamton, that people who live in intentional communities have better mental health than average US Americans. And I have a whole bunch of things to say about why I think that's true, but I think the biggest thing is significantly reduced stress. There are also extraordinary services that exist in the community. If I want ice cream, I can go to a drawer, I can fill out a little form, I can put it in there, and if I get it in before noon, I'll have that ice cream delivered to my freezer with my name on it and the accounting done for it, and I don't have to do anything, including thank the person who did it. The person may be completely invisible to me. And when I give the tour, I say, so I have a personal shopper. You don't have a personal shopper. You know who's got a personal shopper? Beyonce. Beyonce and I have personal shoppers, right? So that's a particular kind of service that exists in the context of the community that's extraordinary. And it turns out to be good for lots of, it turns out for reducing vehicle use and all that kind of stuff. All right, and we have amazing food that we grow here. The joke is that people come for the ideology and they stay for the food. And that is a lovely Canadian intern of ours from many years ago. Okay, so here are the takeaways. Having access to the commune creates a situation in which access is more powerful than ownership. The commune's built out of a collection of diverse libraries. There's a significant internal core value of promoting fairness amongst the people who live here. We're trying to facilitate decisions rather than depending on hierarchy. And then my own personal pitch, which is that a rich life is about having good options rather than amassing money. And none of these are requirements for communes. It's just harder to do it if you're not approaching in that fashion. All right, that's some promotion of my personal blog. And that's our funny last slide. How am I doing for time, Cynthia?
You're doing great. Yeah, good job with time. Thank you for that.
Happy to take questions.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, Paxis. That was a really nice overview of, what a commune is, what income sharing is, some of the pros, some of the cons. I think you really sold it too, because it's quite radical and also has a lot of benefits that people maybe hadn't thought of before. So I encourage people to please put your questions in the chat. Actually, Thomas just wrote, I was just going to say he reminds me of Beyonce. Because you have some things in common with her that I didn't know about.
Okay. I can. So Melanie's sitting on what is a complicated question in the world of communes, which is, I've got my own little tiny house. Can I just pull up and move in? And for decades, the answer to this question has been pretty much no. Particularly for the egalitarian communities, the idea is that the people who are living there have sort of the same living experience, including the shelter that they're in. So if you come here with your super tricked out tiny house, then you have significantly plusher and nicer circumstance than most people, and that feels unfair. That said, the tiny house movement is accelerating in the United States, and the egalitarian communities are looking at it in ways that we haven't looked at before. And Cambia, which we'll present later, is actually even building tiny houses, and Cambia is already sort of a tiny house village. So there's more flexibility around this now than there has ever been. And I want to confess that Twin Oaks particularly may be last in joining onto this because we're big and slow to change. And I see Melanie saying, what if I'm just arriving? What is not some fancy house? I just want to live in my van. Currently the way membership works at Twin Oaks is you go through your 3-week visitor period. If you get accepted as a member, we can't give you a spot until there's a room. Mm-hmm. Because we want you to have a room. We want your life and circumstance to look like the other members, and so much has changed, particularly since COVID. That could be different in 6 months. Gotcha. And particularly, so I'll give you a little hint about our internal experience of waiting lists. So we hate waiting lists, and the reason that we hate waiting lists is because the people who are on the waiting list who we are most excited about, they're the ones who have the most options, and they're the ones who drop out first. So as long as we have a waiting list, we are losing some of our favorite candidate members. So that puts some pressure on.
Gotcha.
So does income sharing apply to all the income you earn? I want to answer that one.
Sure.
No, it does not. There's two different states of income for people who are at Twin Oaks as members. You can do, if let's say you had something that you made income on before you lived in the community, and you came and you could make income doing that. If you wanted to, if you're making your quota, then you can do that as your side hustle, and you can keep that money. There's some restrictions about, not building a shop inside of the community and that kind of thing, but you can it's relatively accessible to take your previous job and continue to do it for money, or you can give that money to the community and get labor credits, or you can do a mix. You can say, okay, I've got this reasonable paying software job, and I'm gonna do a little bit of that for myself so I can save some money. And that money that you save goes into an account called vacation earnings, and you're not supposed to use those vacation earnings while you're on the farm, right? We're trying to avoid envy. So if you've got a fancy computer programming job and you make a bunch of money, we don't want you bringing a lot of wealth in here that sort of shows off your status. But when you're away, when you're on vacation, you have access to that.
Wow. Right. Very interesting.
So I want to put in ic.org in answer to Taylor's questions about intentional communities in New Jersey. There absolutely are some. And there are, if you go to the ic.org website, they will give you the list of the ones, and you can look by state. And there are dozens in New Jersey. Remember that intentional communities come in a large spectrum. A very small number of them are communes like us. A much larger number of them are co-housing circumstances, which is more like buying conventional real estate.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That's my answers to what I've seen.
Good. Thank you for that, Paxos. I think I have one more question for you before we wrap up with you. Just hearing the different elements of what it means to live at Twin Oaks and fit within the structure and the practices. I'm even thinking of just hour tracking and how that might be a really big adjustment for somebody who isn't used to tracking all their hours for all these different tasks. What is it like for somebody to transition from normal reality into a system like Twin Oaks?
So I don't think, I often ask people who come as visitors and new members, what has surprised them? Like, what is different from their experience and the things that they were expecting to have happen here. And when I'm describing Twin Oaks, I often say that we're a clockwork community. And by that, I mean more than just lunch is always at noon and dinner is always at 6. But there are a whole bunch of things that are scheduled, and we have this sort of complicated labor scheduling system. And if you come from a very high income position like a lawyer or a computer programmer, they very often ask you to track what you're doing down to the fairly small amount of time. But for most positions, the amount of internal tracking that we do for labor is a little unusual. I will plug Acorn, where I lived for 3 years before they threw me out. Acorn does not do the same kind of labor tracking, nor does Cambia. There are many communities that don't feel the need to do the same level of tracking by age. I'm sorry, not by age, but by for labor. And what is the difference? I think most people, the big transition for most people is you have a lot more control over your schedule, and you've got this obligation to make quota every week, and you have to figure out, hey, am I somebody who needs to be highly scheduled so I make my quota? Or can I just leave my labor sheet blank and sort of fill in things as I go along because there's always work available?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I want to answer Leslie's question.
Yeah, go for it.
So we have a very unusual pension system, right? So when your quota is 38 hours a week, and when you turn 50, you get 1 pension hour, and then every year after you get another pension hour. So I'm 67. So my quota is reduced by 18 hours. So my weekly quota, because I'm an old person, is 20 hours a week, as opposed to the regular 38. Now, if you're lively, I'm pretty lively, that means I'm banking a whole bunch of labor credits, which means I can take longer vacations or buy things internally. You can buy things internally with it. But the key sort of unasked question in Leslie's question is, what happens at the very end of life, right? And we, in late 70s, 80s, we often take people off the labor system completely. We say, do what you can do, contribute as you can contribute, but our expectation is that you've paid your dues to the community and you're off the hook.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Paxis. That was really informative. And now we'll go to another income sharing commune community. We have Acorn Community here with us. And I also, just before we go to Acorn, Thomas, I want to acknowledge your question. And I think that would be a really good question for us to ask all the communities at the end. What is some first steps towards living this kind of lifestyle and getting involved in a community like this? So it's a good question. We'll circle back to it at the end. And now I want to give the floor over to Ira and Scott. Hi, you two. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah.
Great. I'll pull up your presentation now, so everyone should be able to see that. Nice photo.
How do you go forward?
Is it working when you advance the slide with the one that you have open?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I can see your cursor. Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
and now we have the video.
Okay, this is a drone footage of our community here. You can kind of see this is the building that we're in right now. That green building with the green roof, and then you can see a lot of the gardens where we grow our food and our seed crops out in the front here. This is about a 72-acre lot, and a lot of the other buildings are kind of hidden amongst the trees. Here we go. This is just to give everyone an overview.
Yeah, it's nice.
There's a tiny house hiding in plain sight.
You can see a green roof. And that blue building back there is a rather large building where we have a wood shop and a music stage and an art room.
And a multi-purpose space that we can use for seasonal work, like garlic that takes up a lot of time at a certain time, or when someone is building something. And it's nice to have that flexibility. Yeah. Acorn came of time when Twin Oaks was full. I lived at Twin Oaks in the 80s for 10 years, and when Twin Oaks had a 2-year waiting list for people to be able to join, and I think Pax says, we don't like waiting lists. Great potential communards go somewhere else when they have to wait too long. Kat Kincaid, who was the founder of Twin Oaks, and some people who were on the waiting list, and some people who used to live in community long ago, all started corresponding and thinking about what we could do about it, and reaching out to Twin Oaks as an institution. And out of that discord came a proposal, and Acorn was born. And a couple of the things that were different were being less of a clockwork community, and also thinking we wanted to be more agricultural, although not having made a living in agriculture, we didn't know what that was going to look like. Yeah, and we were a small number of highly motivated people with, some friends and some people who helped us to do better because they asked us so many questions about what we were going to do. And Twin Oaks lent us some money, and that was a really great thing. And there were some members who helped us in those early, late years to get started and build something. Yeah. And kids still get dressed up in sunflowers. There's old pictures of Twin Oakers with kids in sunflowers. Because kids are still a wonderful thing in the commune. Dogs and cats are still something to fight about, and there are more people who want them than there are spaces for them to all live closely together. So.
And we're one of the communities that still has our original founder, Ira. You've been here for like 35 years?
I am one of the founders. There were 10 of us, and yeah, I just guess I stuck around. I mean, in the beginning, I was a half Twin Oaker and a half Acorn, and I still, in my heart, love both to death. You know, I said we didn't know what we wanted to do agriculturally. Because someone wrote an ad that was really true, like good work, poor pay. We met the founder of Southern Exposure Seed Exchange and their little seed company, being one of those people working with them for a year, and he wanted to sell the business. And we took all our pennies that we could get and borrowed a little bit of money and bought this business and grew it up from something that we had to do crafts work to support to something that supports the community and offers support to a lot of farmers. We don't grow so much of the seeds. We work with a network of farmers, and we also repackage seeds that we buy commercially. And on a good day, we work together with our friends at Twin Oaks very well. We do a lot of things with other sustainable ag organizations throughout the state and actually throughout the country to have a better seed system. And it's funny, these pictures reminded me that when we're making a picture of ourselves, that showing pictures of our wonderful vegetables is one way to get people excited about what we're doing. It's pretty fun. And I think because an elderly Black woman is more memorable than many, and as I talk a lot, I have become a bit of the face of Southern Exposure. But we're looking for a new generation of seed people who want to be radical in income sharing and stuff together to keep carrying it on. And a little bit it's working. Those acorners, they work hard, they play hard.
Yeah, these are a few slides just showing that we're a community that definitely has fun as one of our central values, and hard work. So here's some of the things we do: our pool table, party. This is us. This is us. Everyone getting together and doing like a large cleanup. We have a lot of like really talented musicians that live here. The lead singer in this band, Sappho, her father was an Acorn member, and he brought like a lot of like wonderful music, original music to Acorn and the communities around here. You can see people up in the upper left. We're all playing World of Warcraft together, just like as a team building thing. All sorts. We play board games, and this is all of us gathered around where we have our evening primrose parties that we have yearly. And so just we're a community that values fun and hard work. Yeah, and Ira's obviously like a huge gem to Acorn and the communities movement and the seed movement, and their mentorship has been huge towards guiding our community over many years. And she has a lot of recognition from the outside, especially within the seed world. But yeah.
Yeah, that's the embarrassment. I hadn't looked at these slides until I realized that last year I thought was my year of getting a lot of attention, and those pictures happened to be on top, and they tumbled out. And that's about how many minutes you're going to get fame in the commune itself too, is as long as it takes to look at these pictures.
Well, it's really wonderful to have someone that people can kind of go to ask almost any sort of question, like about gardening or about the history, and it's a very valuable part of ours, a very valuable part of the community.
Well, this is actually, I think, kind of points to how important the business has become in the community. Sometimes we started a business to support our community, and sometimes our community supports heirloom seed preservation in the movement. These heirloom collards are a real joint thing that we do, and it's been a way to support newly emerging BIPOC seed initiatives, especially in the South. These Ujama seeds, and who would have known there's like 90 different kinds of heirloom collards to be eaten. Moving on.
This is some of our gardens from this year that people are working on. But yeah, just to kind of reiterate what Ira was talking about, a lot of Southern Exposure kind of offers an opportunity to work with a lot of larger projects within the seed movement. And Ira is very connected with that, and kind of just knowing her allows people to kind of engage in a lot of different, with a lot of different people who have a lot of different areas of expertise, especially in gardening in the seed world. And so a lot of younger people come to Acorn and they learn a lot from her and then her connections. This is a slide of, we do, aside from building a business, we also are building a community here. This is us working on a sauna, everyone kind of working together as a group, putting a sauna kit together. And here's a picture of some of our gardens where we're growing out some of our seed crops. Like every year, some of our gardens are dedicated to growing seeds that we sell in the business. And
I think we grow smaller amounts of larger number of things than seed crops here on the farm. And one of the good benefits of that is we get to eat the stuff. In addition to taking pictures and writing descriptions to share about the varieties. But the fall garden is the best. It's like, you're slowing down and all these greens are growing up and the bugs are slowing down and you don't have to chase them so hard as you do during the summer. It's pretty nice. And we did that before we had a seed company, but now that we have a seed company, instead of having to have another job to support the growing, the two kind of are mingled.
This is just a fun little slide of something that I was working on. It's more of just like a dream of just like, this is a site plan. So there's always been this idea here of Acorn Community, SCSC, connecting with the larger community, especially in terms of like the garden and food worlds. So this was kind of a building that we just kind of, I just put some imagery to kind of give an idea to that dream of just like, you know, potentially like in the future, something where we could kind of connect to the greater Virginia community here and the greater networks.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of workshops and things at conferences, and we used to work, you know, with Mother's News magazine, doing these educational things. But it would be really cool if we could make some cool, sustainable spot here that is for outside education. Anyway, and it's cool looking at the pictures because those pictures remind me of when we first came here and we were planning and building our first building, and it was so inspiring.
Yeah, the building Heartwood, right, that was built by almost all communards.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the buildings here.
Mm. Beautiful.
Is that the end?
I think we're, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So people get asked questions. I didn't say that much about sort of how we are, because in some ways it's being a little bit more toward anarchist. Twin Oaks and Acorn have many of the same foundational principles, and we're little and always trying to catch up.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Ira and Scott. That was a beautiful presentation, and I love seeing your vision there for the building at the end. Yeah, thank you so much. And feel free, if anyone listening has questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. I have a question for you, because Paxis spoke about the economic structure, labor tracking. How are you similar or different to Twin Oaks with things like that?
Well, we share income. We don't track labor except randomly when we want to try to find out how much we're putting into a certain type project. So you get subjected more to meeting scrutiny than turning in your labor credit sheets, but you have a similar thing of the community is responsible for the same kinds of things. I think being a little bit more organized about it at Twin Oaks makes it, when you have disagreements, you have more records to make the numbers be agreed upon. And you have longer process so that people have more time to make up their mind about whether they want to change their behaviors or not. But you're, you know, a small number of people, you also see more of what people do with their time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense, because Acorn's a smaller population than Twin Oaks. Yeah, great. Scott, anything you want to add about that? The differences between the two?
We do track labor to, so I guess that is a similarity. We use kind of like an app to track it, and that kind of allows us to kind of like see all the different areas that people are working on very quickly and kind of get a rundown of what people are doing week to week. But a lot of it is kind of modulated through conversations that people would have with each other, in terms of like what each person's needs are and what the priorities are in the community at any particular time. But yeah, there's definitely lots of differences. So, and things that are similar, but it would, you know, it would take a long time to probably cover each of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. And does Acorn have space for more members right now, or are you at capacity?
Currently, we probably have room for a few more members or visitors, or so. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, nice. Good to know. And Scott, just one more question for you. I'm curious, how long have you been living there? What's a little bit of your story?
I came here in 2017. Before coming here, I worked doing some architecture, doing historic rehabilitation, preservation work, and then I kind of started getting into homesteading and gardening through my network of friends, and then that kind of led me to Acorn about 7 or 8 years ago. And Acorn has gone through many, many, many changes since then. It's a very mutable community, especially because of the way its decision-making models work, and it's been a very interesting experience to have lived here, and it's been especially a very valuable learning experience.
Yes. Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I think sometimes we have these ideas of communities as a fixed institution or setup, but to remember that they're very malleable and change, and the culture change, the people change. So, wow, good reminder. Okay, thank you both. Thank you for that overview of Acorn Community. Really appreciate it. Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
great. And I think we'll stick around because we'll have more Q&A here at the end. But next, I want to go to the last community to present today. We have Gil here with us from Cambia Community. Hi, Gil. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hi. All right. So I'm about to attempt to go to the presentation, and we are expecting technical difficulties. So does that work?
Yeah, there is a little bit of a choppy internet connection, but we can
so
hear
I'm
you.
going to all right. So maybe I should just be sure to turn off my camera in case that makes a difference.
Okay. And we can see your screen. So if you want to try going into the present mode for your presentation.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yes. And I will now press on the present mode and see if indeed we'll get cooperation. So I think it's processing. So I'm going to start speaking. And the main difference between what I'm going to present and the other ones is I am presenting a deceased community, or at least one that's on pause. So the community has been for about now 9 years or so. And it had several iterations and a rapidly by the way, do you guys see any kind of images? Because I don't.
No, not yet.
Presenting.
Yeah. We might just to stick with the slide presentation. So I apologize about that. But, speaking of, so Cambia as a community has the community, the other one, established relationship with the communities here. It's at its peak, we were 12 people here, and we've built pretty much all our home. We had a that were working. I think that between
Oh no. Oops, I think we lost Gil there. Seems the internet connection is pretty poor. That's unfortunate. We'll give it a few moments, see if they're able to reconnect. Apologies, folks. It happens sometimes. We have these presenters who may live in more rural locations where the internet isn't as strong. I'm really glad, though, we had relatively good internet for Acorn in Twin Oaks. Let's see. Gil, are you back with us? Let me know if you can hear me.
Having discussions about shared values, having practice of gratitude, the time in which we days, meditation, and various things that were sort of bonding together rather than having like a specific structure people had to. They were just sort of like cultural engagements. And so I was thinking if I can sort of phrase that in terms of like
Gil,
this
I'm
thing
sorry
maybe as
to
values,
interrupt
because
you. Oops, I'm sorry
I
to
thought
interrupt
that
you, but
values
we're
seem
really
to
not able to
be
hear
very
a
valuable to
lot of what
people
you're
because
sharing.
they sort of seem to have them as ornaments rather than as working tools. And so I thought like, well, there should be a community that's functioning well, regardless of its particular values. But then we've learned over time that people kind of need the values as kind of like an agreement, a vow that they share together. Not necessarily that they know how to follow them or that they agree what they are, but it creates some degree of solidarity. So we realize that we can state our values. We're also going to need to come up with ways of sharing them. So image that you can kind of barely see how to barely listening.
Oh,
We're just
Gil,
listening to people what
it
they want to
seems
speak.
like you're not
Yeah.
able to hear me, but we're having a lot of trouble hearing what you're sharing. And I'm so
So
sorry about that. I don't think the connection's strong enough to hear you properly.
I'll make one last attempt to step outside and see if it makes a difference.
Okay. I
Is
turned
it
your screen
working
off.
better now?
I turned your PowerPoint off just so we can try to
Okay.
hear what you're saying. It does seem a little
Okay.
better. If you want to just maybe just summarize briefly what you shared. Yeah.
Mhm.
Let's see.
Yeah. My apologies about that. We just don't have a good enough connection here. So let me summarize and say that as Cambia Community, which is no longer functioning as a community right now, we have practiced culture as our binder, sort of our glue, to avoid some of the apparent necessity of, well, you could say the clockwork nature or bureaucratic nature that communities have, or maybe any kind of like money tracking or labor tracking. So we sought to avoid that by simply having more practices that bond us to each other and to our shared goals. So, just to give examples, we had a regular practice of eating our meals together, holding hands before the meal, speaking from our heart, a gratitude practice. We built like a temple where we'd get together once a week and have a vulnerability practice. We did drama therapy, a variety of things that were all intended to build the cohesion such that we maybe don't need as much of, say, the technicalities or the bureaucratic element of community. Did that register? That
It did. We can hear you much better now. That was
okay?
really helpful. I'm hearing, yeah,
Mhm.
the different models of Cambia choosing to focus more into culture, versus having more structure or bureaucracy. Very interesting. I think we missed, though, at the beginning, if you could share a little bit about the history of Cambia, how many members you had, and a little bit about what's happening currently.
Yes. So we started, there was several of us from a defunct community in California where the owner of the property wanted to move out and start another community. We were living together. And so me and my wife, our son, kind of pioneered that and had some other people plan to join us in starting a community here in Virginia. This was primarily because, well, whereas we wanted to join Twin Oaks was full at the time, and so we thought of just starting one. So right away we had some members. We've had different quantities. It oscillated a lot. At the peak, we were 12 here. There were 12 of us here, which I think included, 8 adults, 4 children. We had the farm business. We had a subcontracting business. We were building our homes, homeschooling our children, growing a lot of our own food. So we were practicing permaculture and practicing towards renewable energy. So we have gone off the grid. So we have a solar array. We have a variety of other technologies and techniques that we implemented here. And so we have been this sort of like permaculture community, eco-village. You can sort of imagine the usual kind of like straw bale building with clay, rocket stoves, rocket mass heaters, outdoor showers, like a variety of techniques, solar ovens and failed solar experiments, and all this sort of the thing that you can imagine in a community. We've been operating on a low budget. But the main thing is that the population has not been stable, so people come and go a lot. And in that, it can seem okay on the surface, but in my mind, it felt like something is not working. Even though everybody seems to have a different reason, maybe, for why they leave, maybe we're asking the wrong question. And there's something that's the reason of why they're not staying. There might be something missing. And I think that even though, like, we know most relationships don't last, right? Most businesses fail. I think that witnessing the failure of the community, despite a lot of the benefits that we were offering people. So, for example, people get their own place. They have a lot of privacy. We were we're not just income sharing, but we're profit sharing. So that means at the end, when you leave, you accrue equity and you take that money with you if you leave. We've done different models in which for a while we're making decisions together every morning, and then we switched to making decisions like once a week. People were free to operate in different domains and whatever. We tried a lot of different iterations, and it just seemed to me, my sort of preliminary conclusion is that when the community is too small, it lacks the sort of critical mass or thermal mass to keep people feeling like they're part of something big. And I think that's kind of the time in the party when it feels like, all right, I feel like I'm ready to go home. Like, that is not really clear what does that to people, but it might just be as simple as how many people are there at the party. And so I think that because of small number, we never have been able to really establish ourselves. When there were 12 of us here, lots of people to join us, and we didn't have enough homes for everybody. And after some people left, kind of like everybody left. It's been very hard to restart from there. We tried a few times, and it seemed to not have worked. So not to dwell too much, because I want that to be more part of the discussion. There's a lot of hypotheses as to why it doesn't work. But basically where we're at is we're now just 4 plus 1 child. We have another member or resident joining us. and maybe in the future. But rather than having the structure of community where income sharing and there's clear expectations, it's more by person, like how many hours would you like per week? What's your budget? That sort of thing. And so I don't really think of it as a community except for choosing our members, because we don't actually function in the like their goal and be more individual goals. It's much more, it's more um
Oh, okay. And we lost Gil there, dropped off. But I'm really glad we were able to hear a lot of that, and very interesting what I heard about the community not having enough population to have that critical mass of people. And then when an already small community started to have people leave, then a lot of people left at once. Gil, you dropped off there. So we weren't able to hear what you had shared.
using straw, working a lot with clay, building
But we
models
can
for
hear
things, but
you now.
also in that engaging as an educational program. We've been inviting students, high school, middle school, tours here, teaching them through workshops. And we've been working lately a lot with university students as interns in a variety of areas. So
cool.
computer science, even statistics, psychology, architecture, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. So engaging, it's kind of become more of an educational institute where we work with students individually on issues regarding how we're going to make a better world. So that's, I think, a summary of where we're at right now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gil. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. You kind of came out a little bit and then came back, but I think we got most of what you shared, and I'm really happy to hear that although the community isn't, as you say, a community right now, you are doing this education work. So that's wonderful. And thank you for also sharing so openly and honestly about the history and what's been happening lately. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear the challenges, and I really appreciate you sharing, because I think that it's good for all of us as a movement to hear about the successes and also to hear about the struggles to build community. So thank you for your presentation today.
Yeah, I think if I can just add a little bit about that, I do believe that there is maybe that as us as a community, as well as some others, we um, we are going up against very strong headwinds of capitalism offering not just employment, but a sense of meaning for people. So, employment opportunities give you career, give you pride. Your parents are proud of you. Your friends are saying that's so cool. It's really difficult to tell your friends, like, oh, I live in a commune now and we learned how to work with mud. It's really hard to feel proud of that. And so, I think that the only way for communities to really potentially like grow and thrive is to maybe try to find out what of some of the harder to describe needs of humans can be better addressed, better answered. And I think that it could be a fantastic success. We're just not quite figuring out yet how to make it appeal to many people and really feel like a source of pride and self-actualization.
Yeah, thank you for that. I hear that, going against the headwinds of capitalism and a bigger culture that has different values than these communities do and the people who live in them. Yeah. Great. Okay. Thank you so much, Gil. And now I actually want to open it up to a discussion portion for our remaining time together. So Ira and Scott, if you're there and you want to, there you are. Hi. And yeah, I just think this is such an interesting experience to have these three communities, all with similarities and differences, different stages of development or de-development, and also our audience here and all the things that you've been hearing, maybe some questions that have been coming up for you. Verona, thank you for your comment. Be proud. Here, I'm just going to put this up. Verona says, be proud that you've rediscovered how to build and grow and cooperate. That's a lot to be proud of, absolutely. So yeah, I guess one thing I'd like to start with is just curious the relationship among your communities and with Cambia and what was happening there. Was Acorn and Twin Oaks kind of aware of the situation? Did you have a reaction? Just very curious about anything you want to share. No pressure, of course.
So I think the communities have complex relations with each other, particularly Acorn and Twin Oaks. So Acorn, I consider Acorn a daughter community of Twin Oaks. Ira was explaining the sort of origin of how Acorn came out of a period when Twin Oaks was full and people wanted to start a new community. Acorn and Twin Oaks share the seed business, the quite successful organic seed business, Southern Exposure, and Acorn handles the retail part, which is individual gardeners writing to Acorn and say, I want these seeds, and Twin Oaks handles the wholesale part, which is moms or some organic food store or a garden center wants the whole rack of seeds to sell to their customers. And I think we're doing pretty well managing that joint business, given other frictions that come up from time to time. And I think Ira also mentioned Acorn is more anarchistically oriented as a counter to this. Twin Oaks is more bureaucratic and clockwork style. So I think we have not only different membership, but we have sort of different philosophies about who makes decisions and how decisions are being made. And in the end, I think we've come to agreements about how we go forward in making the business work for both sides. The thing that I wanted to add to Gil's presentation, which I think was, and so the thing I want to say about Cambia and Twin Oaks is Cambia and Twin Oaks have a scaling problem. Like Cambia is very close and Twin Oaks is very large. And so most of Twin Oaks is sort of unaware of Cambia, but then there are some high impact oakers like myself who are over at Cambia a lot and engaged with them a lot. So there's not like any kind of uniform relation. And Cambia is also involved in some of the agricultural stuff that Twin Oaks does with the seed business. So there's all manner of work and social alliances, but they're quite different kinds of community. The thing I wanted to say about Cambia is that there's a sort of an argument between some of the Louisa communities about, is community a hardware problem or is it a software problem? And the hardware problem is, what are the buildings? What is our sustainability? What is the income model? And the software problem is, how do the people interact? And what are the values? And particularly, what are the cultural things that you build in your community that makes you a community? And I think Cambia was way ahead of the bigger communities in terms of working the software problem. And that looked at things like, there's the greater awesomeness principle, that the purpose of the community is to help you attain your greater awesomeness. So when I was at Cambia, one of the things that we had to do is we had to write down what our greater awesomeness was, and then talk with people in the community about how they were going to help make that happen, right? Like this idea that there's a dream alliance, right? That you live in the community and part of your obligation is to express your dreams and part of the community's obligation is to make those dreams happen. I think this is super important, and I think the larger communities miss this. And particularly, and even if you don't know your dreams, then the community's obligation is to help you figure out what your dreams are. And I think Cambia is way ahead in terms of that.
Yeah. Thank you for the compliments. I would like to not respond to that, but to try to answer Cynthia's question from my perspective. And my perspective is that the communities don't have as much of a shared identity. They might have individual identity of each one. They might have work relationships, but unlike, let's say, say churches or something like that, that see themselves as acting towards trying to reach the public, and I don't know what they do, convert more people or serve more people, something like that. I think the community don't have a sense of like, we are a movement, we have a goal, we have these values, we're going to work for them. Which is why I think that communities don't really try to start new communities much, or try to support communities that much. And that's not to say that they disbelieve in them, but I think that still the main belief system of people in communities is individualistic, or they belong to individualistic culture. They haven't taken on, it's not like a cult. People don't actually assume a shared identity and a new orientation to life. So I think that there are relationships that emerge, but I think that there might be either strictly business relationships or there might be individual relationships. But I don't think there is a shared sense of identity of like, oh, us communes are one day going to take over the world and create a new reality and a new person that's going to be like that it's not part of an ethos, and nor is it trying to like get condoned or developed.
Gotcha. Great. Yeah, that's really interesting, that perspective around not as much inter-community identification, more identification with the community that you're part of.
Yeah, even
great.
that I think is pretty minimal, but yeah.
Okay. Ira and Scott, what are your thoughts on this conversation? About the relationships among the communities in Louisa and the ones on this call.
I do think each community is more, people are trying to adjust themselves to their individual community and its culture. And we don't necessarily, there have been times when we've tried to be more of a little movement and learn about each other, but at this time, it's not such a strong thing. I sort of hope this community convergence thing that's a part of the communities conference might create more of that space. But, you know, it kind of reminds me of being in various Black movements when I was a teenager, and groups that were so close together were picking each other apart and taking energy from the bigger struggle in the world. And I think it's a little bit like that in the communes. You know, when a bad thing happens, people are more likely to respond and be helpful. But if it's something that's spread out over time, it's very hard to say it's important to find our commonalities. But maybe we will.
Gotcha. Scott, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the communities have foundationally, they have a lot of values in common, especially with the income sharing model, and the idea of sharing things, I think, is actually kind of what a lot of the common DNA is. But I think beyond that, we're connected through the FEC, which has these founding principles, but then how we put those into practice and how we've kind of grown as communities, I think, over a long arc. I mean, Twin Oaks has been around for more than 50 years, and Acorn has been around for more than 30 years. There's definitely been a divergence in terms of how those communities have evolved and how the values of those communities are represented. And I think that even though there's a lot of common ground to build from, that there is a lot of, even though we're so close, there's a surprising amount of difference between the communities.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, well, thank you all for answering that question. And I'm also appreciating everything that's happening over in the chat. Thank you, Paxos, for answering these questions. Really appreciate it. And appreciate the folks asking the questions. Good. Well, I think we can wrap up soon. I do want to appreciate everyone for coming, taking the time to be here, all of our presenters and our folks who are listening and writing in the comment box, and of course, everyone who's watching later or watching somewhere else online. And I want to put a plug in for next week on Thursday. We're going to have what was to be our regularly scheduled August communities presenting, which are communities in North Carolina. So we'll be going just a little bit further south to visit a few communities in North Carolina. Same time, same place, next week on Thursday. So be sure to tune in for that if you want to learn more about communities. And then continuing on in the months ahead, we plan to have our regular virtual tour of communities event on the first Thursday of every month at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So with that, I think we can wrap up. I think we'll just close with one more question that I would like each of you to answer. So we have many people listening and watching who are new to intentional communities and all the different forms and models, and they have a desire to have more community in their life, maybe join one of these communities, maybe even someday start a community like this. What are some pieces of advice you might give to somebody at that early stage in their community journey? And maybe if you even think back to when you first were getting involved with intentional community, what is something you wish you had known or thought about more? Doesn't really matter, anything that comes to you, but keeping it a little short here because we just have a few minutes left. And feel free to go in any order, whoever feels free to start.
Maybe I'll just jump in. What I would recommend is to, rather than try to answer what kind of community am I looking for, what do I want, what can I do, what would I enjoy, to ask what would be a good way for people to relate to each other? What would be a beautiful world? And could that really work? Now and then imagine yourself in it. But start from answering the question selflessly and then test it on imagining, could that work? And I think that also in the pursuit of community, if you pursue the community that sounds good to you, it might not be the right community. You have to seek a community that you think would be good for itself. So, for example, if the community has a low labor quota or low bar for entry, that might seem like, oh, great, I think that's right for me. But if you ask yourself, wait, if nobody there worked much on the community, what would that look like? And if they let in anybody, what would that look like? So I would say start by asking, what should a community be? And then think, how would that actually feel to live in there?
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you, Gil. Who'd like to go next?
Chance to meet some people from communities. Conferences are good. These tours that you talk about, going to visit several different communities so you experience the breadth of it, is also a good way to help you figure out what questions you really do need to answer that you didn't even know existed.
Great advice.
Yeah, ask big questions, see what core values the community has, and try to do that work of having that discourse and dialogue up front. And if you're looking for a community that you want to join, and just trying to have those sort of conversations, I think is a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, Paxis, you're muted. You have to unmute. Yeah.
I want to give a specific example of the deeper question that Scott is talking about there. It's actually a question that's on both the Twin Oaks and the Acorn interview questions, which is, if you had a magic wand, what's the one thing that you would change? And if you're going to a community that you're interested in, you should ask that question to every member that you talk about, because the answer to that question is likely to be something that you're concerned about, and you want to understand what your relationship to the thing that they would want to change is. I just dropped in a Reddit article that I created about, if you want to start community, what you should do. If you're interested in actually starting a community from scratch, you can take a look at my very non-conventional advice, which starts with, don't buy land first.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, great. Thank you, Paxos. And I appreciate all the links you've put into the chat to the various blog articles, many of which I think you've written. So appreciate that body of work and making that available. Great. Well, thank you all so much for.
I have one more thing to
Yeah.
suggest to people.
Okay.
Quick one. If you don't want to join any community, then don't start one. Starting community is very difficult, and if you can't find one that you like, you probably won't like the one you live in, even if you create it.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Thank you, Gil. Oh, I like that. I also really appreciate what was shared earlier about thinking about what you could see as a change that you'd like to have in a community. And for me, that's often an indication of something that I possibly could contribute to the community. So I often, when I feel disgruntled about something in my own community, I'm like, oh, wait, that's a reminder for me to take more initiative in that area. So great. Okay. Well, words of wisdom. Yeah, appreciate you being here, and just blessings on all of your work in your communities. And thank you for sharing it with us here today. It was very inspiring.
Welcome.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Cynthia.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Cynthia, do you want to go to the phone?